Hello. No, let's move things. Hello there. We are in Unit 8, looking at topic 8.2, Human Impacts on Ecosystems, which is focusing on human impacts on aquatic ecosystems. So here we're going to talk about, what am I going to talk about? Oil spills. That's what I'm talking about here. In aquatic systems, the first thing that I want you to know and what College Board wants you to know is how oil affects marine mammals, which have fur or hair, as all mammals do, and how it affects birds, which obviously have feathers. So when the oil gets on their fur or their feathers, it makes these animals no longer waterproof. Both fur and feathers, they have these stiff, bristly hairs that are called guard hairs, and they interlock together on the outside. And they form like a waterproof barrier for the animal. However, when oil coats those guard hairs, they can no longer interlock and they slip. And the oil causes them to slip. And then the water can then touch the animal's skin. And if it's an animal living in colder climates, then the animal might potentially suffer from hypothermia. So oil spills can adversely or negatively affect marine mammals and birds because it prevents their guard hairs from forming a waterproof layer, and then the water is going to end up touching their skin and they can suffer from cold shock or hypothermia. This is just a picture showing an oil slick on the water and an oil covered bird. As far as the impacts on fish, they can, the oil can get into their gills and clog their gills, which is obviously going to impede their breathing. They can ingest the oil, which could directly kill them. So it's going to affect, my point here is that it's going to affect, mammals and birds one way. It's going to affect fish in another way. It's going to affect invertebrates, animals without a backbone like crabs and lobsters and crayfish and stuff like that. The oil can smother them. It can be really thick, heavy, unrefined oil, which would, if it's really thick and heavy, they might not be able to move. So they're going to become immobile. The oil can get into their gills and clog their gills and cause suffocation and things like that. So I know I'm moving kind of fast, but that's okay. Two notable oil spills that you should definitely know about. The Exxon Valdez. What you should know about the Exxon Valdez is that it was an oil tanker. So it was shipping oil from the port of Valdez in Alaska, and the ship ran aground. And when the ship ran aground, it ripped a hole in the bottom of the ship, or the hull of the ship, leaking oil all over the place in Alaska, killing tons and tons of marine life, affecting these really untouched, pristine coastlines. Here's a map here in blue, this area showing everywhere that the oil spread to. The oil spill originated up here in Prince William Sound, and then it spread to the southwest. This was a major problem because obviously all the marine life dying from it and affecting these coastlines that were essentially untouched prior to this. We'll talk about cleaning, how they tried cleaning it up. We'll go back to that picture when I talk cleanup. All right, the other major oil spill that I want you to know about, the BP oil spill, otherwise known as Deepwater Horizon. Deepwater Horizon was the name of the drilling rig here in the Gulf of Mexico. This happened in 2010. And this one's a little bit closer to home in terms of time and location. And so the oil rig collapsed, and as it collapsed, it basically broke the pipeline in half. And this picture here on the left is just the broken pipe just spewing oil for days and days and days. You can see almost 90 days until they were able to finally cap that pipeline. So that was another huge disaster with lots of animal life dying. So let's talk about cleaning up oil spills. First and foremost, we can just let things go and let bacteria that naturally exist in the environment, we can let them degrade the oil. And they're basically consuming the oil and converting it into a non-toxic form. But this takes a very long time. So most companies and governments that are responsible for these oil spills are not just going to be like, we're just going to leave it be and let it wait, because clearly the public is going to demand, like, hey, you need to clean this up quickly. Another option, a big one that was used for the BP oil spill in 2010, chemical dispersants. A dispersant is like a fluid, and it's applied over the big oil slick, and the purpose of it is to disperse the big oil slick or break it up into smaller droplets. Why we want to break up the big oil slick into smaller droplets is because the small droplets are going to be, it's going to be easier for bacteria to degrade smaller droplets than it would be one, massive oil slick that covered many, many, many miles. So we used a lot of chemical dispersants in 2010 to clean up, well, I'll use air quotes, clean up the BP oil spill. What essentially happened, we had planes flying over the whole area of the oil spill, releasing the dispersants. And yeah, the dispersants did break up the oil slick into smaller pieces. Oops, nope, can't get out of this. Broke up the oil slick into smaller droplets, and those droplets began to sink in the water column. So it kind of looked like from above, like, hey, the oil is cleaned up. We can't see it anymore. But the oil was still there, just deeper in the water, hanging out, slowly degrading. And some scientists did some studies after the fact, and it turns out the chemical composition of the dispersant was actually more toxic to certain types of zooplankton than the oil was. So, that didn't work out so great. Other ways to clean up oil spills aside from dispersants. We can burn the oil. Oil is less dense than water, so it's floating on the surface, so we can just torch it. So we're getting rid of the oil, but we're creating a lot of air pollution. We can use a boom to contain the oil spill. Wait, there we go. Trying to jump to here. Here's what a boom looks like. I'm sure you've seen them near construction areas here in South Florida. But they can be put out to contain the oil, so maybe it won't creep into a wetland or something like that. This is what I wanted to show you before. This is a map in the Gulf of Mexico showing you the area, this gray shaded area is everywhere that the oil spread to in the BP oil spill. All right, so anyway, let me get back to my PowerPoint. Boop, 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 boop. So we could use booms to contain it. A boom doesn't clean up the oil spill. It's merely just going to keep it in one place so that way it doesn't spread further. Once we've contained it, we can then burn it, let it naturally degrade. We can use skimmers to scoop it up off the surface. We can use absorbent materials to, again, absorb the oil. But again, the problem there is all right, so now we're absorbing the oil. Now we have all these oily rags. What do we do with them? We could put them in a landfill, which is going to take up space and potentially leach the contamination out of the landfill. We could burn the oily rags, which again, air pollution. So those are currently all the options, major options that we have to clean up an oil spill. And of course, if you have oily animals, they get rescued, cleaned with some probably Dawn dish soap, and returned back out into the wild. When birds get removed of their oil, it does take some time for their feathers to get back to their previous waterproofing abilities. And so they do get cold. And so sometimes you'll see after an oil spill, people will put out on social media, hey, we're looking for people to knit sweaters for injured birds. And here's a cute few penguins. I think these are little blue penguins that have sweaters. That's neither here nor there. I think I'm going to stop this video and that's call it a day for oil pollution. I'll be back with another video for wastewater and biological oxygen demand. So, ta-ta for now.